So that means non-explicit.
Right. Okay. Welcome to the podcast, Guillermo. I'm super excited to have you on. For people that have never met you before, I would love to introduce everyone to my friend Guillermo and tell them a little story about how we met. So a few weeks ago, I was totally fanning out about his podcast, which you guys, if you don't follow him already, you should go download 30/30 Health Podcast. He interviews amazing people. And he was just telling me that his vision is really to connect the functional medicine community to the naturopath community, to the bulletproof community, to the, everybody that kind of works in the health field. We overlap so much with our mindset. And so he interviews these amazing people. And so if you go listen to his podcast, you'll not only hear me on a recent interview, but a lot of really, really cool people as well. Like even Layla Ali was just right before me, which was pretty awesome. I listened to that podcast. But I actually reached out to him because I was totally loving his podcast. And I said, hey, I love your podcast. Thanks for doing what you do. About a week later, I said, Kylene, you really need to be bold and reach out and ask him if you can interview him sometime. And so I did. And Guillermo was kind enough to say, yeah, I'd love to be on your podcast. And then you can come do a guest spot on my podcast. Well, a couple days later, I was listening to an interview he did and realized that he was going to be at Mindshare and that we were going to meet in real life. So I was super pumped about that. So I messaged him again. I was like, hey, dude, I'm going to see you in a couple days. And we connected and we were able to record a podcast when we got home. And we've sort of been coming off the high of Mindshare and kind of sharing our experiences. So welcome, Guillermo. I'm so happy to have you. And I'd love to ask you what your biggest takeaway was from Mindshare.
Well, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool meeting you, and I scooped you because I had you on my podcast.
You did.
Yeah, and then now you are having me on your podcast, and your ratings are going to go down. So I got you before those ratings went down.
I doubt that. They can only go up.
But yeah, no, Mindshare was pretty cool. A lot of these conferences, for people who don't know what Mindshare is where the who's who of health gets together and they kind of, strategize and we plan. And there was like legislative talk and there was, the future of functional medicine and all of these cool people like Mark Hyman, Alan Christensen, you name it, were there. And you get to pick their brains and you get to talk to them. And I don't know, for your listeners, there's a video on YouTube of Conan O'Brien talking about cynicism, okay, and how he doesn't, sarcasm is cool. Sarcasm can be super funny, and you can be, kind of funny about it. And he was giving this speech the last day at NBC, and he was talking about like there's one quality that he hates. And that's cynicism, because cynicism brings people down. Cynicism is depressing. Cynicism is not only I cannot elevate myself, so I'm going to bring you down. And when you go to conferences like this, any conference, and you can be a cynic and sit there and be like, ugh, it's the same people every year, or I already knew this. This is so 2008, or you can go there and get inspired. And I choose to get inspired because I try to fight cynicism. And one of the coolest things was sitting there and listening to Brendan Burchard and saying, hey, the biggest obstacle to you is your own proficiency. And that hit me right in the heart because how many things do we do every day that we're so good at? Maybe you are good at, exercising. Maybe you're good at deadlift, and you can just walk in, put on some plates on the bar, do your lift, write it in your journal, and then you can continue improving on your deadlift. Maybe you're really good at meal prepping, and then you Sunday morning you wake up, you have all your lists, you start cutting veggies, you start making your food. Maybe you're really good at podcasting, and you just turn on the computer and you can hold a conversation. But what if we actually prepared like we prepare for things that we are not very good at? What if, instead of meal prep Sunday, we had meal prep Sunday classes and we taught people, and we could use our proficiency to elevate others. And that was like really mind-blowing to me, because there's a lot of things that I can do naturally. I can connect people naturally. But imagine if like I had a plan of attack. Imagine if I had like, this is what I need to do during Mindshare. This is what I need to touch this person through my next podcast, and have an avatar and have intention and prepare like I prepare for things that I don't know. Like if I have a difficult patient coming in and I kind of study their case, and like imagine if we prepared like that for everything we did, we would be invincible. And that really is, what I took away, that and you gotta walk like a predator.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was
that was recent.
Yeah, for people that may be listening, they might be really into football and know who Bo Eason is. And he was in the NFL, and his brother was in the NFL, and he gave a couple speeches, but he was a keynote one day, and he was talking about presence and, basically winning your audience by your stature, your confidence level, your owning the room. And he talked about coming across as embracing your natural predator state as an animal, basically, but not in a weird sort of, we think about that word as sort of a negative term, but it's really about owning your body, owning your presence, owning the room. And then people are just drawn to you. And he exhibited that in such a strong way. You were totally pulled in. You could not look away. I was like blown away by his presence.
And not only like we can talk about your audience or whatever, but what about at work? Are you showing up, ready to pounce, and like the analogy that he made is that, if you're at the park, that's a cute bunny, whatever, that's a cute squirrel. But if you're a tiger, like if a tiger was at the park, you'd be like, oh man, like looking at that tiger and be cautious about that tiger and paying attention to their movements and just be that tiger, with your presence, when you wake up, be up and ready to go. And really those two things have embraced ever since we came back from Mindshare. And seriously, like, you remember what we did right after Bo Eason?
The video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we went outside.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to be a tiger.
Yeah.
In the middle of the, the Savannah Cat Convention, where it's like nothing but cats, I was a tiger.
That's
and
right.
You could see people looking at us and like, who's this kid, doing this live video in the middle of Mindshare. But yeah, man, I was owning it. It was awesome.
I will absolutely say that was a big takeaway for me. I'll catch myself standing a certain way or crossing my arms or folding my, and the demonstrations that he gave. And it's like, nope, you got to stand with confidence. You got to, be present. You got to be aware. So that was definitely a really, really good one. All right. So I'm going to flip the script on you a little bit here. Since I was just a guest on your podcast, I'm going to use your question on you, Guillermo. And I would love for you to share what is your hero journey?
Well, it's weird, because I geek out on this hero's journey, and I just had a guest on my show describing actually like the mythical and the history of this hero's journey and how it's replicated in every single culture and in every single mythology. And even Bo Eason talked a little bit about how we have to defeat Goliath and how, we want to be David and, but like my personal hero's journey in how I got to this space started around, 2008, 2009. I was doing P90X. Like, who didn't do P90X?
Oh my gosh, no way. That started so many things for so many people. Totally. I totally have it, by the way. Yep.
Yeah. You remember who does the recovery shake commercials at P90X at the end of each episode?
At the end of each one? It's not Tony.
It's Mark freaking Season.
No way.
Go back and watch it.
I never made that connection. Are you kidding me?
Go back and watch it.
What?
Like, seriously. So anyways.
Mark Staley Apple, for those of you who don't recognize that name. Mark Sisson, writes Mark's Daily Apple. It's a blog. You should go check it out.
So,
oh my gosh, that just like blew my mind.
No, and it's gonna continue. It's so weird how everything's connected. Okay,
yeah.
So there's this dude. His name is Fitbomb. The blog's still available, and he wrote a blog post after every workout. So 90 blogs. Okay, and like I hated that workout so much, but I enjoyed reading that blog so much that I did it a couple of times. I did a couple of rounds of P90X, and after each round, you would sit down and I would read. And he's really funny. He turns out that he's a lawyer, and his name is Henry Tam. Okay, who one day said, "This is why I eat like a caveman," and that was the blog post. And I started reading this blog post. At the same time, when all this happening, I was working at a level 1 trauma center for kids in Orlando, Florida. Shout out to my peeps at APH. And I saw miracles. I saw so many cool things happen, saving lives, like literally. But we never have a good solution for chronic disease. And if we need to patch someone up that has a broken bone, modern medicine is amazing. But what happens when someone has a heart attack and goes to the hospital and they get discharged with eat healthy? Sure, the intention's there. But I started thinking to myself, I want a profession where I can sit down with my patients for an hour and talk about nutrition. And prescribe pharmacologics if needed, and talk about exercise and sleep, and they need to wear those weird glasses at night, and not be look like a weirdo when I'm making the suggestions. Turns out that through blogging and podcasts and whatever, I hear Chris Kresser say, "Oh, naturopathic," and I'm like, "What's that?" So I go in on the Googles and I'm like Googling, and turns out that naturopathic medicine found me, not the other way around. So I fly from Arizona all the way from Florida all the way to Arizona to this little tiny school, and I'm like, I'm walking through the halls and like I'm sitting student for a day, and I sit down and then one of the classrooms, and you're talking about like, your gut is important. And like, I'm like, ooh, that's cool. I know about this. And then I look around and like, I see all this like happy people. And then I see, this girl is drinking water from a mason jar. And I'm like,
what?
And I could hear Hagrid in the back of my head saying, "You're a wizard, Guillermo."
I love it.
So turns out that Henry Tam, okay, continues writing this blog under Fitbomb, and then he introduces his wife, Michelle Tam, who makes Num Num Paleo. It's so insane, like how all these people are, related, and how we all cross paths.
Yeah.
And now we're here talking to a whole bunch of people that will have a hero's journey because of the spells that we're casting with our words. It's so cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow, all those connections, man. Yeah. And it all started with P90X. Tony Horton changed lives. That is so funny because...
A German potato soup.
Yeah, it was like, when did that even come out? Like early 2000s, maybe? I don't know. I remember watching the infomercials for it, and we got it at my house, and yeah, that is crazy to me that we even have that connection. That's so funny.
Thankfully I hate chronic cardio, and I was smart enough to read, about like, okay, yeah, that's a good gateway to hit exercises, and that's a good gateway to other things, but there's better ways. But yeah, Tony Horton, he really did a number of people.
Yeah, that's amazing. So today specifically, we're going to talk about your expertise in Hashimoto's, which I'm really, really excited to tackle. We actually even have some questions from some of my audience. They wanted to kind of dig a little deeper with you, so I'm excited. But can you just start us out with, what is it? Kind of explain to everybody, what is Hashimoto's, in maybe some terms that they can understand, that we can understand?
So, Hashimoto's is your immune system attacking your thyroid. It's an autoimmune condition where for some reason you've created some immunoglobulin or some little proteins that are meant to defend you against pathogens, against bacteria, against viruses, against, different chemicals. And those little immunoglobulins also are attacking your own tissue. So within functional medicine, we talk a lot about like, you change nutrition, you can change so many things. And autoimmune disease is this like umbrella, physiological process in your body where you could be attacking maybe your elbows and have a little bit of psoriasis, maybe your joints and have some, arthritis, maybe your thyroid and you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. What about your intestines? And then you can have things like celiac disease or Crohn's disease or diverticulitis. So imagine let's say that what's making you tick, what's making you autoimmune to all these things is this little inflammatory protein called gluten. Okay. So now you remove gluten and now your body is not attacking gluten itself, and now it can modulate itself and it's not attacking your intestines, your thyroid, your plaque psoriasis. And that's why people have such great results when they go into a hypoallergenic diet. Okay, so back to Hashimoto's. When you're creating these immunoglobulins and they attach to your thyroid, that little immunoglobulin acts like a key, and it can either open up or close off your thyroid. If it's closing off your thyroid or preventing the release of thyroid hormone, and at the same time damaging the tissue, creating cysts, creating nodules or a goiter, that's Hashimoto's. If it opens up your thyroid and it starts dumping a bunch of hormone, that would be Graves' disease. But it's basically the same disease, the same physiological process, the same pathology with two different outcomes. So that's in short, if you have been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, okay, and you either A, have any changes in the cytology or in the cells of your thyroid, or if you have antibodies to your thyroid, you could be classified as Hashimoto's. The thing about Hashimoto's is this: the only way to truly diagnose Hashimoto's without doing it clinically is if they take out your thyroid and they slice it, and then they see all of the cells and none of the cells have any changes. Okay? So if you have hypothyroidism, even if you don't have and autoimmune antibodies to your thyroid, even if you are very low on the changes of the cytology, chances are it is more probable than not that the reason you have this hypofunctioning thyroid or this lazy thyroid is because of an autoimmune disorder. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will come to me and they'll bring their labs, and there's a range for the antibodies, mm-hmm. And then if it's higher than 34 for your TPO antibodies, that means that you have Hashimoto's. So they'll have like 27, and they're like, yeah, my doctor said I don't have Hashimoto's. Well, I'm not going to just sit there and like looking at my watch. Okay, you're at 33, not yet, and then 34 now. Oh, now you have Hashimoto's. No. In lack of antibodies vary daily. So it's like if you are walking outside in the desert, okay, and then you come back to the doctor with 2 puncture wounds on your ankle, and then the doctor is like, okay, so it looks like a snake bite. It's inflamed like a snake bite. I'm going to go look for snakes. I'll be right back. And then, it steps outside. It's like, I didn't see any snake. It's not a snake bite. No. Chances are that those 2 puncture wounds came from a snake. So lack of antibodies doesn't necessarily disqualify Hashimoto's. It's just that you cannot make the diagnosis at that moment, but we can start treating it, and we can start doing things that are low-level interventions to help you reverse autoimmunity.
Love that. I love that you ended on reverse because I absolutely think we can't cure autoimmunity. Once your body has the ability to attack itself, we know that it always has that,
Yeah.
like innate knowledge. But we can manage, we can reverse the symptoms, we can maintain health even after that diagnosis. So I want to get into that. But first, what are the symptoms of Hashimoto's? When should someone pursue testing? Like, what are they going to notice is changing in their bodies that would kind of indicate maybe this is an issue for them?
Well, funny that you say when should someone pursue testing. So I came to this medicine, like I told you, because I wanted to prevent disease. I didn't want you to end up in the hospital where you probably receive very accurate care at a very expensive cost and without any long-term repercussions. I want the best way to stay healthy is prevention, and it turns out that most of the people that come to me have already been diagnosed with some sort of hypothyroid, or they have, read blogs and they've had, and they know the symptoms already. And then they come to me already sick. So I'm still, even in the functional medicine realm, even at a cash-based practice, even at a, with nutrition and all this, I still see sick care. And it's kind of sad, wouldn't you want to see people that are coming to you, not because they feel sick, but because they want to improve? Okay. So it should be part of your yearly physical, getting a TSH, getting a T3, getting a T4, free T3, free T4, TSH, and TPO antibodies and antiperoxidase antibodies. That should be, and you should keep track. Okay.
Now, those are some of those are difficult, I think, to get conventional medicine practitioners to even order, right? Like they'll do a lab, but they don't always include all of those markers.
So if you have a history of autoimmune or hypothyroid in your family, it might be a little bit easier to talk to your doctor. If you have nodules, or you feel like getting an ultrasound would be even more important than just getting the T3, T4, TSH, and the antibodies.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to your doctor and you say, "Hey, I'd like to check this stuff," and they say, "No," fire them. And go look for someone that's going to pay attention to you.
Absolutely.
My whole thinking is that I am not, and for your football loving fans, I am not the coach of your health. I am not the coach of your health. I am the quarterback of the team. I've seen the game, I've played the game, I've scored, I've won a bunch of games. But you can always bench me. And if you come to me and you say, "Hey, I want to order an old test, or I want to order a Dutch test," or those tests, I don't find a lot of clinical value. I like to start at a lower level, and then work my way up rather than just make you spend tons of money. But I will voice this opinion and then say, "But we are going to order it, because the last thing that I want for you is to be denied something that you want, because it is your health, and I will help you interpret it." Okay. So go look at, one of the first blog posts that I wrote for my blog was how to find a doctor for you. And it's a 3-part blog, because I was going to medical school and all of my family was like, "Hey, so I have this," and I was like, "I can't help you, not yet, but you should go and read this. And these are the qualities that you should be looking for. Someone that is, that is evidence-based, someone that is practicing well within their scope. You don't want an awesome MD that is doing, things that are a little shady. You don't want that. You want someone that is going to be well with the lanes. You want someone that will listen to you. You want someone that is going to be part of your team, not your boss. And those are qualities that you need to look for when you're looking for a doctor. As for symptoms for hypothyroid, and this is insane because it's fatigue, okay, thinning hair, nodules on your throat, weight gain, hormonal imbalances. You get sick a lot. You're not putting muscle. You're wasting away a little bit. Osteoporosis. Any of those symptoms of like kind of like chronic fatigue or any of those symptoms like flu-like symptoms and things like that can be attributed to Hashimoto's. So the thyroid hormone, so what the thyroid hormone does is it goes into every single cell in your body, goes into the nucleus of the cell, and it helps make proteins, and it helps create more cells, and it helps ramp up your metabolism. So imagine your car, you're not pressing that accelerator. You're like half pressing it. And so that's what hypothyroid would feel like. Someone that is like, hey, 4 years ago, I was able to do X, Y, Z. And now I can't. And I cannot attribute this to age. I eat healthier than I used to eat. I move more than I used to move. And now I have insomnia, and then I'm tired, or I can't keep myself awake, or, those could be symptoms of having hypothyroid.
Mm. Do you find that a lot of this comes after an underlying condition, or maybe sometimes for women after pregnancy and things like that?
So there's a whole HPA axis, okay? And so you have your pituitary controlling the output of your thyroid, of your adrenals, and in your case, your ovaries, my case, my testicles, and hormonal imbalances. And your pituitary is kind of orchestrating that. So when you go through a period of extreme stress, where you're relying a little bit more on cortisol, when you're relying a little bit more on your thyroid, you are releasing one of the things that I mentioned that you should measure. It's TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, or thyrotropin. You're releasing that TSH, and it's an inverse relationship for your listeners. The pituitary releases TSH. The higher that TSH is, the more you're requesting from your thyroid. The lower it is, the less you're requesting. So it's a signal, okay? The louder the signal, that means that your thyroid is not outputting enough hormone. So through that period of stress, you might be requesting too much cortisol, you might be requesting too much thyroid, and by requesting, by sending that TSH signal, you are overworking your thyroid, which predisposes you to have nodules, which your immune system is going to recognize as intruders, which is going to destroy thyroid tissue, which is going to create this circle of autoimmunity. So because your pituitary is requesting more hormone, your thyroid is overworked. There are cytological changes. Your immune system might notice these new cytological changes that weren't there before, and you start attacking your own thyroid.
So basically, and you sort of touched on this a little bit, but stress is huge, and nutrition.
I guess I didn't answer your question. So yeah. No, I have something else to say. Yeah. So yes, most of the people get diagnosed with a thyroid condition after an event of extreme stress. Many times after the delivery of the first or second baby. So you have this super stressful episode, your immune system gets all jostled up, and now it starts being active against your own tissue.
Yeah. And just to kind of clarify for people, there are several things that kind of come into balance at the same time for someone to develop autoimmunity. So just because you get pregnant, you're not going to get, or just because you're super stressed, you do have to have environmental triggers. You have to have genetic predisposition. You have to have all these things, super activated immune system, all that kind of works together. But for those of you who are, predisposed to have this, a major stressful event can absolutely trigger autoimmunity. And so kind of being aware when you're trying to maintain and reverse, and once you have it under control, that's something really, really important to know, because you need to monitor your stress levels going forward as well to sort of keep everything in check.
And it's something that I do see in a lot of my patients, and is that a lot of times they come in and they have all of these stressors, and they won't leave any of them behind, and this is
Guillermo, we can't leave our kids behind. So. Just kidding.
I've joked with a couple of my patients and said, yeah, you're just gonna need to give them up
for adoption.
And that's something that I can deadpan really well. It's like, yeah, you're just gonna have to get a divorce. But
no, we have other solutions.
But so they'll come to me and they're like, I'm so stressed out. My levels are off, and I'm doing everything right. I'm exercising 5 days a week. I'm doing intermittent fasting. I'm all of this thing. I have a type A personality I'm a CEO at this job or whatever. There's only a certain amount of stressors we can handle. And from situation to situation, we should be able to kind of like mitigate that stress and move it around and control it. Like, for example, when I was at school, when around exams week, sometimes we had 12 exams in 1 week, and sometimes it was like 12 exams in 3 days, because we wanted to learn everything that goes on in the human body in 4 years, which is impossible. But
right.
So when that happened, you could see, I would see my friends or my colleagues, and they were like, I don't care, I'm going to eat whatever because I'm stressed. That is like the worst time to be eating whatever. In fact, whenever it was, exam week, that's when I would go like almost like autoimmune paleo with my diet.
Super nutrient dense.
Super nutrient dense, super hypoallergenic, because I had so much stress from not sleeping. I had so much stress from just, the cortisol spike of going into a room and people saying, if you fail this, you're not a doctor, and that I knew that stress was coming. And in order for me not to break, I would control the stress in other ways, because I knew I wasn't going to sleep. I knew I had to study. I knew I had to take this exam, so I can control my food. Just think about it. If you have a long commute at 7 o'clock in the morning in super heavy traffic, can you change traffic? No, you can't. But that's a stressor that will be there for you. What can you do to mitigate the effects of that stressor? And that could be as easy as maybe mindful meditation, maybe not listening to metal music on the way to work, maybe, making sure that your breakfast is super, amazingly nutrient dense and almost hypoallergenic. You always hear stories of people that say, the weirdest thing happened. I went to Europe and I was eating whatever I wanted and I was doing whatever I wanted and I lost weight. Why? I came back and I tried to do the same thing and I'm gaining weight. And I was like, well, you were on vacation. You were probably sleeping better. You were walking more.
Way less.
Stressing way less, walking more. Of course, you mitigated the stressors from work. Now you get a little bit of latitude with your food. And when we try to combine all of these stressors, because there's now, not to say that stress is bad. Exercise is a stressor. It's called hormesis. I don't know if your audience is familiar with hormesis, but basically what doesn't break you makes you stronger. So you break a little bit of muscle doing, your squat, and then your body recuperates and then rebuilds that muscle. And now you're stronger. Okay. That's what intermittent fasting does. You are stressing your body to create these proteins and to destroy bad proteins and to, release certain hormones like ghrelin and then And then when you refeed, now your pump is prime, and now you can see some benefits. But if you overstress your body, it's not like, oh, I'm going to do a 16-8, a 16-8 feeding window where I don't eat for 16 hours and I eat for 8. And then you're like, you feel better, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to go 20-4. And now you're only eating for 4 hours. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm looking amazing. I'm putting on muscle. I'm just not going to eat. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
Or like, oh, I'm lifting. And then if you put 600 pounds and you've never trained up to 600, you're going to break. So being able to mitigate stress so you don't flare up an autoimmune condition, so you don't flare up fatigue, and so you don't stress, it's so important in order for you to control these outcomes.
Yeah, basically what's in your control is your reaction to things, your sleep, and your food, and all that other stuff is out of your control. So if you can kind of handle those couple things, that lowers the stress load so that everything else that comes that you can't control doesn't affect you in such a strong way. But I think those are things that a lot of times are difficult for people, right? Like, we want to stay up really late at night. We want to eat that cake when we're stressed during finals week. We want to do all these things, but those are some of the most simple steps that we can take to sort of give our body what it needs to handle everything else.
And then, and there's always the what can I take to, what supplement can I add to, like one of my most hated questions is, what can I eat to lose weight? Like, that makes no sense. What can I input into a system to lose? That makes no sense. Like, it's baffling that people ask that. But you hear it, I prefer, what can I take away to lose weight? That makes sense. What can I avoid to lose weight?
What takes the burden off, or what allows my body to function and do its job properly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And supplementation is important. There's some certain things that we do want. But like, I compare it to golf, like golfing, you can always buy better shoes. You can buy better balls. You can buy better clubs, and you have like this incremental things, and that's why people, like sports like that, where you can just spend and spend and spend and get better. With health, doesn't work like that.
Right.
Sometimes health, you actually have to do things. And people do get into those traps that, oh, I'm taking this for this outcome. I take this for this outcome, and I take this for this outcome. And in reality, the number one supplement that you can take is self-discipline. And you can't buy that.
Wait. Hashtag, say that again, please.
Yeah, the number one supplement that you must take is self-discipline.
We need to make a t-shirt. Actually, we have two now.
Yeah, we're gonna have a line.
I know, yeah. I love it.
And sadly, I have people come in and they and they're like, okay, doc, what should I eat for breakfast? And I'm like, dude, like, I'm a doctor, and you're paying me a bunch of money to see your labs and to recommend pharmaceuticals, and to, you're wasting your time because I don't have the training to create a meal plan. I don't have the training.
It's super frustrating. A lot of people want you to do the work for them. You can give them the guidelines, but then you need to fly little birdie out of the nest. Especially if you want them to create an actual lifestyle that's permanent. You can't depend on other people for that.
But that's why we have health coaches. Like, if you do really need someone to help you with that.
Well, to get started, I think information, it's the support, but eventually you have to let go of that. Like, you can't depend on somebody else to keep you going. Like, it has to become an internal thing for you.
And we can create systems for them,
right.
and we can help them with lifestyle choices. And we can explain to them why, if you are a type A personality with autoimmune disease during a flare-up, maybe intermittent fasting is not for you right now. We can explain all those things to them. But in the end, it's going to come down to personal responsibility. And that's why I love this movement. Because this movement is based on people stepping outside of the conventional model of medicine and actually doing something for themselves because they are tired of being tired. They're sick of being sick.
That was actually a really good transition to my next question. You didn't even know. But one of my listeners did say they wanted to know what's the best diet and lifestyle measures for Hashimoto. So when you have someone come into you, do you talk a lot about diet and lifestyle and kind of give them the basics? What's the foundation and what's your approach?
So I'm a paleo guy. I came to this movement through the paleo diet, and I think that 90% of the stuff that we were talking about back in 2008, 2009 still applies. Don't eat processed foods. Make sure that you're sleeping. And actually that has changed over the years for me. I used to think that nutrition was like number one, and now like I can see how sleep is just so important. It's not yet number one for me, but it's like a close number. Like they're almost
right
far and far. Yeah, because people know, like intrinsically, they know that sleep is necessary. With nutrition, you still have to kind of convince people that low fat, and all of those fads, are not necessary. But I nutritionally dense diet, staying away from traps. We talked about this during my podcast and how people, like they'll go vegan or they'll go paleo or they'll go keto, and there's like a sense of confusion of what that is. And automatically people kind of like cut back calories because they literally don't know what to eat. So then they have this honeymoon phase where they're like losing weight, they feel better. They went from a standard American diet to something that is a little bit better. They start feeling great. And then they start going on blogs and they start, looking at recipes. And then they start making these processed foods with really nice, nutritionally dense ingredients. But guess what? They're still processed foods. So staying away from paleo, cookies and paleo brownies and
paleo, fake paleo, is that? Yeah. I love it.
There's, and now not to say never to have a brownie. No,
it's still a treat.
It's still a treat. Yeah. It's a treat. It's not
better than the alternative.
Totally.
But yeah.
Okay. So did we talk about the glycemic index?
No, let's do it.
Oh, okay. So about the glycemic index. What has a higher glycemic index? A boiled potato or French fries?
A potato.
A boiled potato has a higher glycemic index because the fat in the fries is going to slow down the carbohydrate intake.
Counteract it.
Yeah. What has more calories?
The fries.
Correct. So around 400 calories for
and like 100 for a potato, maybe.
Totally. Yeah. So there's no shortcuts. Okay, one of them is going to spike your blood glucose, but it's not a lot of calories and it's going to be satiating. The other one is not going to spike your blood glucose, but it's going to be very calorie intense. Same thing. What is more inflammatory? Whole wheat bread or gluten-free bread?
Oh, that's a hard one. They would probably be around the same, wouldn't they? Because of all the starches and stuff.
Well, what's more inflammatory?
Inflammatory would be the whole wheat bread.
Correct. What has a higher glycemic index?
The gluten-free bread.
Because it has no protein. That protein, gluten, that slows down its introduction into the bloodstream, and it helps you prevent a sugar spike. So, and
it's replacing all the wheat with starches that are
rice, sorghum, like you name it. So a gluten-free bread is going to be less inflammatory, but it's going to be off the charts on the glycemic index. Yeah. So in the end, sure, gluten-free bread is going to be a good option for your kiddos, maybe for you if you want to kick your heels up, every once in a while having a BLT, that's delicious.
Avocado toast.
Avocado toast, for the hipsters out there. But in reality, it's the changing of the habit and avoiding, all of this processed foods that is actually going to be the way. So instead of, of substituting your bad habits with healthier bad habits, we need to substitute the lifestyle and appreciate a salad, and appreciate, and, in India, like, so in the United States, when someone gets sick, someone, people, mom will bring you chicken noodle soup and some crackers, and some ginger ale. There's no ginger in ginger ale anymore. The chicken noodle soup has wheat, and it's probably came from a can, and so just, but it made you feel good. Your mom was there, and it's like healing. It's healing. In India, when someone gets sick, they don't bring chicken noodle soup. They bring rice and ghee. And you can transplant people, and the chicken noodle soup is still going to be healing if you live in India, if you are from America, and the ghee is going to be healing if you're in America and you were raised by Indian parents. So changing those habits. Now, when I get sick, my comfort food is some yellow curry with chicken and rice. That is my comfort food. It used to be whatever it was before. I don't even remember. But now if my stomach is upset, I come home, I thaw some chicken thighs, I throw some frozen veggies, I put some curry powder, and I make a little bit of white rice, and that will settle my stomach. Is it placebo? Is it because curry has a bunch of cool, spices? And I don't care. It makes me feel better. And if we can change our perception of foods and stop letting cake be a comfort food, and maybe make maybe a tablespoon of almond butter is going to be now your comfort. And if we can change those habits, then we have true change, and then it's going to be easier to stick to this healthy lifestyle.
I couldn't agree more. I love it. Another question from the audience. Anything, so this is a little more specific. It's still on, I would imagine it's overlapping a little bit, but with Hashimoto's, you typically see thyroid damage. So is there anything diet-wise to preserve thyroid function? And if you feel like you've already answered that, I did have a question about the best supplement or prescription. There's Armour Thyroid, there's Synthroid, there's all these different things. Is there one that you prefer? Is it per individual? Is that something that they can sort of wean off of at some point, or because the damage is there, it's going to be permanent? Can you answer some of those?
Totally. So I do have this conversation with my patients almost daily. And they'll always say, oh, is this forever? Am I going to, am I going to have to take a prescription medication for the rest of my life? We should not measure our health in the number of pills that we take per day. We should measure our health in the things that we can do with it. If that tiny little pill is going to allow you to drive through traffic at 7 a.m. for your dream job, if that little pill is going to allow you to walk your daughter down the aisle, if that little pill is going to allow you to play with your kids, who cares? Okay. But I'm gonna start with the different types of thyroid medication. Okay. And then we're gonna move into why thyroid medication is so important to reversing nodules. Okay. So before the 1970s, most people were taking Armour Thyroid, which is a pork desiccated hormone that they would grind up, and then they would measure in this archaic term of grains. And you hear it like, oh, 1 grain, I take 2 grains, and then people like compare their grains, and then 78 or around that time, a girl overdosed with thyroid, with natural thyroid, and in the pharmaceutical companies pounced on that, and they were like, oh, okay. So the problem is that Armour Thyroid was standardized to iodine content, not hormone content. So T3, which is the most active form of thyroid, has 3 iodine molecules. T4, which is less active, has 4. Okay. So imagine if you're counting iodines, if a pill had 12, you don't know if it has 4 T3s or 3 T4s. So from pill to pill, Armor has a lot of variation. And that's why I don't recommend Armor, because it's not super well standardized. Okay, it is natural. It has T3, it has T4, it has T2, which we don't understand much about T2, and it also has thyroglobulin. And thyroglobulin kind of, one of the antibodies that we measure is thyroglobulin antibody. And by taking a little bit of thyroglobulin, your body gets distracted and starts attacking that thyroglobulin instead of your own. So I do prefer natural, okay, but not Armor. Then there is Synthroid, which is like your run-of-the-mill T4. The problem with just taking T4 is that there's people that have trouble converting the T4 into the more active T3 in the tissues. So for those people, it doesn't serve them very well. It is very well standardized, pharmacological level of standardization. Another problem with Synthroid or levothyroxine, it's that some people have like such sensitive immune systems that they will react even to like the binders within the pill. So like they go to the local pharmacy, and then the pharmacy stops getting their shipment from India and they start getting it from China. That change, even though the active ingredient is perfectly standardized, that change is enough for that person to not feel well. And they're like, man, I've been taking this for 10 years and now I don't feel well. So that's why I don't like Synthroid, because of its variability of sourcing, and because some people have trouble converting T4 into T3. So then there's two different products. There's WP Thyroid and there's Natratroid or Westroid. Fun fact, Westroid and Natratroid are basically exactly the same pill. They just, when the company RLC Labs, which is local here in Arizona, it's in my backyard basically, when they make the Natratroid, they package the pills, half goes to Natratroid and half goes to Westroid.
Well, there you go.
But people, when they acquired Westroid, they changed the name to Natratroid, and people freaked out. They were like, "No, I want the Natratroid." Oh, so they were like, "Okay, we'll just label it, two different ways, same pill." Okay, Natratroid, it is well standardized, so it's standardized to hormonal content. It has T2, T3, T4, and thyroglobulin. Okay. But the difference between Natratroid and WP Thyroid, not Westroid, WP, is that WP Thyroid has very little different binders. So WP Thyroid has only inulin and MCT oil. That's it. Natratroid has more pharmaceutical level binders. So it has magnesium estrate, and this has like a couple of things. It's natural, it's a little bit more tightly bound. So we prefer to use WP Thyroid because that's the most hypoallergenic. That is the problem is that right now there's a shortage and they're not making WP.
Oh no.
So we go to the next best one, which is Natratroid. We do see
that's gonna be hard if somebody's used to one and then
God, it's so difficult. Because and I'm gonna tell you a little story about that. It's so difficult because some people are so sensitive to the pharmaceutical level of binders that it's hard to control it. With WP, every time we change someone's dose, we usually go by quarter grains. So 12.5 milligrams in increments. With Natratroid, we have been going like half or 3/4 grain increments, just because it's so much more tightly bound, and people react differently. So, quick little story: my mom has thyroid disease, and I was shadowing Dr. Christensen about 2 years ago, and I'm like, yeah, my mom, she's been suffering with this thyroid disease thing for like 40 years. And then Dr. Christensen's like, let's call her. so like we get her in, and in the span of 2 weeks, my mom, her hair is not falling anymore. She's feeling better. And the only thing that Dr. Christensen did was changing her from Synthroid to WP.
Wow.
Okay, so year
That's
passes.
amazing.
It was amazing. So she's been suffering with hypothyroid since she was 19. And it took like a visit to fix her. You know, it's like,
but with the right person.
With the right person.
Yeah. Wow.
So you know, a year goes by. Now I'm working with Dr. C, and I'm at the office, and then this shortage happens. So we source our product directly from the company, because sometimes you go to the pharmacy and you say, hey, I need some Nature-Troid, and they'll give you Armor. You know, they're like, it's the same active ingredient. No, it matters. Okay. So I had to switch my mom from Nature-Troid to WP. From WP to Nature-Troid. And you know, at the same time, you know, like I'm seeing all these patients and they're telling me, you know, I don't feel the same. You know, I just don't feel the same. And you know, and I'm telling Megan, my girlfriend, is like, you know, I don't know if it's a nocebo effect or what, or, you know, so I do a podcast and I'm talking about like, yeah, you know, the nocebo effect is so powerful. You know, it's the same active ingredients. And I think that people just, you know, see the different label and they don't feel well. And, you know, we need to educate people more. And then, so I record a podcast and I give it to my girlfriend and she's like, hey, I'm not letting you say that. So she cuts that part of the podcast off and she's like, no, you guys use WP for a reason. You guys chose that as the best. You cannot undo years and years of research and, you know, and clinical experience by just flippantly saying, oh, it's just nocebo. So I'm like, okay, cool. You're my producer. You get to do whatever you want with my podcast.
Good for her.
So then my mom calls
That's
me
funny.
like 3 days later and she's like, what'd you do with my medicine? It's not working. And my mom, who has no idea of this change, so there is a big difference between WP and Nature-Troid. And
Wow.
Unfortunately, WP is not back in the market yet. Okay. So we use Nature-Troid at the moment. You know, hopefully, you know, RLC Labs is not going out of business. You know, they are going to start producing that medication. Now, remember we were talking about the HPA axis and how that TSH signal to your thyroid makes your thyroid work harder. If that TSH keeps climbing up, you're requesting more from your thyroid. And if you're requesting more from your thyroid, you're basically saying to your immune system, hey, I'm here. So by taking this thyroid medication, you're substituting the need of your thyroid to work hard, and your thyroid can go to bed and go to sleep and rest. And because you're every time you take a hormone, the gland that produces that hormone kind of gets suppressed a little bit. While you're taking thyroid medication, your thyroid has time to heal. So if you have nodules and you're not dialed in on your TSH, your thyroid is going to be straining itself, and those nodules can grow and become cancers. So the TSH range in your allopathic labs is 0.45 to 4.5. That's a 10-fold range. After much digging into the literature, after more, you know, investigating, we found out that the optimal levels, and this is evidence-based medicine, the optimal levels for your TSH are between 0.5 and 1.0. And once you are between the 0.5 and 1.0, that's when you get into the sweet spot. That's when you get into the optimal zone. And that's when your weight loss is going to be seamless. And that's where your energy is going to be awesome. That's where your HPA axis is balanced. And that's when your thyroid is working just enough to not develop nodules and actually reverse that damage. So that's the sweet spot.
That is such good information. And just to sort of make it applicable to people as well. So obviously that prescription, finding the right one is really important. Finding the right balance for your body is really important. But then also remembering that the HPA axis is stimulated through stress. And so to control that as much as you can, and don't depend on a prescription for everything, but help it do its job by working on your sleep, by working on your diet, by working on your emotional response and stress levels on a daily basis. And then it can work in tandem with whatever prescription works for you. And that way you'll be able to get the best results out of everything.
You know, if in one little nugget of information, the most misunderstood supplement or micronutrient for someone with hypothyroidism is iodine. And if you have Hashimoto's, and especially if you're taking thyroid medication, stop taking iodine. And you can Google Alan Christensen iodine. He has been, telling people about this for so many years. We just did we keep, every year we go around recommendations and we do deep dives. And the problem with the iodine is that after a certain threshold, your thyroid shuts off completely if you have too much iodine, because it acts like a trip wire. And if you continue giving iodine, it's like adding fuel to the fire. And there's a sweet spot. It's around 300 micrograms per day. The problem is that thyroid medication is made with iodine, and you get around 120, 130 micrograms of iodine. So if you're taking thyroid medication and then you take kelp supplements, or you take, iodine, or, you trip that wire, and now you start creating goiters, and you start damaging the things that you're trying to fix.
Ooh, that's a good takeaway. That's
yeah. Look at your supplementation. It's really hard to find multivitamins with that iodine. But having it's one of those Goldilocks supplements. Too little is bad. Too much is bad too.
Oh, there's so much. I feel like we could go on for hours. That's so cool.
Totally.
Okay. So, all right, a couple more questions before we wrap up here. And what do you think is the number one thing you'd like people that struggle with autoimmunity in general, but with Hashimoto specifically, what's the number one takeaway? Like something that they can just start working on today?
Figure out your intolerances, your food intolerances. We geeked out on gut health, but figuring out your gut, the things that make you tick, the things that make you inflamed. It's easy to say to people, you need to sleep more, because that's completely quantifiable. But when it comes to food intolerances, that can become nebulous. And just like when we talked on my podcast about how important it is to do a nice elimination diet, it is as important to reintroduce in figuring out what is not harmful for you.
100%.
And because there is something called orthorexia, which is the inability, or this, you make yourself sick thinking I'm not eating healthy enough. And
the desire to be perfect 100% of the time.
Totally. And I think everyone has a little bit of orthorexia, like I have orthorexia when it comes to like weight. I'm definitely terrified of.
Me too. Yeah. I'm like, I'm just going to basically die if I have a piece of bread. I won't, but
when I got hired for my dream job working with Dr. C, he's all about this, about letting people live their best life, and sometimes people can't tolerate wheat, and it's like, no, heresy and pitchforks. No, there's some people.
Now I will say, let's throw this in there for people who are listening with Hashimoto's. Like pretty much no one with an autoimmune disease should be eating gluten, because it does cause inflammation in your gut lining, and they have leaky gut if you have an autoimmune disease. But if you're a healthy individual listening to this, there are a lot of people that can tolerate it.
Let me tell you, I consider myself to be pretty healthy. I still don't eat wheat.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't have an autoimmune disease. So take that with a grain of grain or something.
A grain-free grain of salt.
So I go to his house, and he made a sourdough bread, homemade. He made with einkorn. Okay.
Oh yeah. That's one of the things we used when we made the initial transition was einkorn. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some wheat, there is some gluten on
Right.
corn, you know, but he did a slow fermentation, and I'm super orthorexic when it comes to wheat, but when Dr. C tells you, would you like a slice of bread? You say, where's the butter?
Yep.
So I cut off this slice of bread and I put some butter on it and I took a bite and nothing happened. I didn't have diarrhea. I didn't, it didn't bloat me.
Right.
But I have been off of wheat for so long that my latitude to maybe have this spike in, I'm more, I can tolerate it better.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was eating that every day, I would probably go back to square one.
Right.
I still stay away from wheat, but my orthorexia is a little bit better after that little experiment.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. All right, real quick question. Let's make it personal. You used the term fake paleo earlier, so I'm curious. What's your favorite paleo snack?
So, I don't like paleo foods. I don't.
You gotta have one.
No, I'm gonna tell you what I do.
Okay.
I geek out on looking at really palatable dishes that are naturally gluten-free. So like, instead of like, oh, I'm gonna have a paleo brownie, I'll just go eat some real ice cream.
Yeah.
or like Cuban food, naturally gluten-free.
Yeah.
And like last night I had people over and I made corn gorditas. It was completely gluten-free.
Right.
But I had cheese and I had 2 different types of stews, like a pork stew and like a meat and potato stew. And
so you're having me over tomorrow night, right?
Totally. So yeah,
I'll fly back to San Diego for that.
So I would much rather prefer eat something that is decadent, that is than trying to reinvent something.
I like it.
Although I do like I do like gluten-free pizza.
There you go. All right, that counts. Yep.
Yeah.
That is a good one. I think that, it's kind of one of those, thank goodness it's there, because it makes the transition much easier for a lot of people. They're like, okay, at least I can have this on occasion. I'm okay. I can do this.
You know what the toughest thing was?
What?
So the toughest thing was Diet Coke. Like Diet Coke was like so difficult for me to give up. Okay. I used to drink around 64 ounces of Diet Coke a day. Okay.
Wow.
I would make all these excuses, for, me drinking as much Diet Coke. So that was difficult. But beer, like gluten-free beer is just not that good, So but hey, it's super calorie intensive and so I just don't drink beer. There
you go. Yeah, I think that's tough for a lot of guys. I think that's probably a lot of guys would agree with you. Like, that's their number one issue. They're like, I can't, that's the one thing I won't give up. But yeah.
No, and I won't drink beer because it has wheat. And I think it's because, there's no like light beer, like I do like a nice heavy beer every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But, like watching a football game and having like a light beer and just.
Yes, there's so much of an emotional connection, I think, for people.
And
like
there's
stress relief and
there's nothing gluten-free that is light, like 55 calories or anything like that.
Well, there's your next challenge. So please share with everybody where they can find you. We already mentioned your podcast, 30/30 Health. Everybody go download that and subscribe today. But where else can people connect with you?
You can find me at 3030strong.com. That's the blog. And I need, after going to Mindshare, I need to start writing again, because I haven't written for that blog, but I do have a couple of ebooks there.
Oh, awesome.
I have the top natural supplements for your emergency medicine cabinet. So, I have different things that you can use for like diarrhea or cough or, pretty cool, well-researched ebook that is really handy and applicable. Great. I have an iron resource guide, for people that have anemia or have had anemia in the past. And then my podcast, which that's where I have a lot of fun interviewing really cool people that shouldn't be coming to my podcast. And then I practice at Integrative Health in Scottsdale, Arizona. And, for anyone that's listening that has Hashimoto's or has questions about Hashimoto's, I'm just gonna give them like a free 15 consultation, you know.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
so yeah, you know, it might not be me because I'm like super packed, but any of the doctors at the office, you know, just if you want to call 480-657-0003, because I'm on a mission and we are on a mission to make the world a healthier place. And it's so hard to not have an ally in your medical professional. And most of the time, you know, it's frustrating. So if you want to have, you know, if you want to talk about something, and maybe we can connect you with a practitioner in your area, or maybe you can fly to Scottsdale and become our patient, or maybe we can do telemedicine. I don't know, but let's get you better. It's, you know, it just sucks, you know, to have an autoimmune condition and no one is paying attention to it.
I love that. Thank you for doing that. I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. So if you guys didn't
Awesome.
have a chance, if you're driving in the car and didn't have a chance to write that down, it'll be in the show notes. Go to the website. But thank you so much, Guillermo. We're totally going to have to do this again. Maybe we can talk about iron or botanicals or something right up your alley. But I'm looking for that to that next conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.